So when you think about how you can look at innovation, it doesn't have to be a classroom. Now, one other example that I wanted to share is our Outdoor Learning Center. We opened this now a little over a year ago. One of the other areas in our campus that was definitely not being used was about 15 acres. That was an area that we had some forest and we had some wetlands. In this space, it was gorgeous, but we were never going to do anything else with this. We certainly weren't going to pave over it or build a building there. And there were some beautiful trails that had been there for years, but no one was using. So we began to think about how this could be that uber third teacher for our students, and especially the upper grades. And so we went on and we built a new outdoor learning classroom. We built an area that is an outdoor chapel area, and then we also developed an area that is a dock system that goes out into the wetlands. So every day our students are actually in these outdoor classrooms and they're actually out in the space. And we built this entire area on 15 acres for less than $100,000. I'll talk a little bit more about the Outdoor Learning Center in just a minute. We also developed an area that's called the STEM Zone. As we looked at how we were developing our students to be these uber makers in the upper school, we realized that in the middle grades, they were not quite getting the same level of opportunity. And so when I started designing this space, it was really funny. I kept using the phrase that I wanted to ooze science, technology, engineering, and math. And finally, one of my team members actually dared me, said, "Michael, it really ooze." And I said, "It's going to ooze, yeah." And so I'm a middle school guy at heart. I was a middle school head for a lot of years. And so I actually wanted to make sure that we had this really fun space that middle school kids wanted to walk through. I believe that there's something that really neat happens in your brain when you walk through a new space or in an area that is not like everything else. So I actually worked with several students to help me design the space. We used fiberglass to build this wall that makes it ooze out. But beyond the fun of the area, this space, though, is this amazing space where our students now are doing very deep robotics, where we're going into VEX robotics by 5th and 6th grade and going to free build robotics by 7th and 8th grade, and then in the upper school well beyond. But this space, again, was simply a classroom that we repurposed. And again, we did this for under $20,000. And we have a space that is one of the landmark spaces in our community. And we have more and more people that come want to see just this one space. Lastly, I just want to mention our new Oasis, which actually just opened this last year. And the Oasis is this 4D Tinker Lab for our early learning students. Now, in the Tinker Lab, what we do is we really allow our students to have the ability to discover, to actually develop, design, and then deliver on their ideas. In this area, we allow for students to come in and whatever they're learning in their classes, they can apply it and have to apply it into something where they build and then have to give something back to the community. This is one of our core ideas, is that through authentic learning and student agency, that we can have an impact on the world around us, and we encourage our students to do so. So just recently, we had students that were building actually circuits, and they built cards, and we gave them to our local hospital for those that were needing some encouragement. But watching our students understand that they can actually make something that has an impact is the really powerful thing. Lastly, I just want to share with you, we just opened a month ago our new Science Explorium, this monolithic dome. Now, this one's kind of fun because I've been dreaming about building a monolithic dome for a lot of years. So if you ask me, was this a little bit of a personal project? Was this just for you? It wasn't just for me, but I'm really excited about this. My grandfather was a little bit of a crazy inventor builder. And he actually taught me about Buckmeister years ago, who was one of the first people to build monolithic and geodesic domes in the United States. And I listened really with not much patience when I was a young boy about these things, but it was in there, right? All these things we say to students, it's planted, right? So it was planted in there for me. So when we began to talk about what we wanted to have as this, again, amazing third teacher that could actually do something that was really unique for our students in the area of science for early learning and lower school, I quickly went to this idea about how we could build this dome. And so when I began to work with our teachers and students, we began to think about what this space could mean differently for our students. We jumped out very quickly on how we could build this space that was, again, a little bit of edutainment, but also very deep collaborative science. So just real quickly, the way it works is we have this really cool area that's called the prep chamber. So as you come into the prep chamber, you can see it's a kind of this red light environment. We talk about what are the goals for the class that day, and then what are the skills they need to bring forward for us to actually achieve those goals, and then what would the outcomes be that would make us proud. If they all understand and they're ready to move on through the prep chamber, we have a light that's switched on, it goes green light, and then they actually then enter into the main chamber. In this chamber, we actually have it set up so we have these learning zones. When the students are at their zones, they actually can share the data between each other. This is something that I'm really, really passionate about, that I believe that the diseases of the future are not going to be cured by some mad scientist in a basement alone. They're going to be cured by collaborative scientists working together, sharing data. The power of the group is so strong. And so we teach our students through this process. But also, if you just look at this picture, I hope that you get a sense that this is not a traditional science lab, that when you walk into this space, that third teacher is saying, you can do whatever you want to do. The world is yours. And we already see that happening with our students as they now are so excited about what that opportunity will be for them as they go into science class. Now, again, this may seem a little far-fetched for you to see this area, but I want to remind you that we are doing this frugally at our school, and you can do it as well. What I have found out through this process is that this monolithic dome costs about a fourth of the cost of a traditional building. That's why a lot of other schools and some of the parts of the Midwest are actually building their entire campuses using monolithic domes. So don't think you can't build one as well. So please go back and think about the missed opportunities on your campus. Think about the things that you could do right now without going and having a brand new building built or a new space. There are lots of opportunities. And even those areas that you may be building, think about what that should be rather than just a traditional space that maybe someone has already seen before or that you've already experienced. Now, the next area I want to run through is talent. As I think about our intentional innovation at All Saints, we have thought so much about how we can actually really employ and leverage the very best talent. Now, there's a variety of ways this happens for us. The first thing that I want to mention, I've talked about the passions, ponderings, and practice that are so important. And so my very first talk ever at All Saints, when I met the faculty for the first time, this is the talk I gave them, talking about how they had to understand what their passions were, what drove them into education, what tethered them still to wanting to be an educator. But then they had to allow time and they had to make space for them to ponder deeply what that meant for them. And then lastly, if you know your passions and you ponder, you will put into practice things that are worthy. But I also shared with them that no one in my 30 years of education has ever really come to me and wanted to talk about my passions, my ponderings very often. They want to come and talk about practice, right? So that drives itself. We have to drive our passions and our ponderings. But I tell you this because this was really important for our faculty to understand the importance for us to know what that meant for us as a campus and how we get to our North Star. Now, one of the books I wanted to share with you that was significant for me as I read through it was Adam Grant's Give and Take. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Adam's work, but if you're not, I encourage you to read about how he talks about how you can further individual success on your campus. Now, he talks about it, of course, in terms outside of education, though it crosses over beautifully. But I will go and just make it really quick. One of my ways that I can express Adam's core philosophy and how it impacted me was through a tweet that he actually sent out not long after his book first went out. He said, "Don't hire for talent, knowledge, or skill. Hire for the motivation and ability to learn." And I know that we still have to look at the talent, knowledge, and we have to look at resumes and all that. But I will tell you, it shaped me so much that when I'm talking with someone at our school, I look more about what their motivation is for being part of our North Star and their ambition towards that, and then also their willingness to learn. One of my favorite questions to ask when we're doing an interview is I always ask, what was the last thing you learned? Now, there's no right answer to this, but what I hope to hear often is that I learned something today. Maybe it's on YouTube, maybe it was on the way to work, a new route. But I love seeing those people that consider learning a daily process. And so when you think about talent on your campus, you have to make sure that you're really getting them into a place that will take you to your North Star. So I use this kind of phrasing often with my leadership team, that you have to know, you have to grow, and then you have to let go of your talent on campus. Now, again, that does mean our faculty, but I'm going to talk in just a moment about our students, and then I'm also going to talk about our community partners. But when you think about this idea of knowing, it is so important that we actually focus in on knowing our faculty and staff. And so when I first came to All Saints, one of the first things I did was that I met with every faculty member on campus, and I spent some time understanding a little bit about the school, but then a lot more about them. My last question I asked of each faculty member is, what is your audacious dream for All Saints? And I want to show you a quick video, and then I want to tell you a funny story about one of the important people for me.
It's made a huge difference in how I attack my day. I mean, to have this as your backdrop every day and to watch my students come across the street and suddenly their moods are different, they're happy, they're receptive to learning.
All
and
right,
so instead of this being...
With Karen Lanford, she was our science teacher at All Saints when I came. And when I first sat down with her, I was a little bit worried because I could tell in Karen that she was on verge of what we often call burnout. I could tell that she wasn't in a good place at the moment. And as we began to talk, though, I watched her get energized when I began to say, well, take some risk. Why don't you do this? And all of a sudden, she's like, wow, we're going to do that? But then at the very end, I asked her, what is your audacious dream for All Saints? And she said, well, Mr. Cobb, if you would build an outdoor learning center, I'd work for free. And so a year later, I got to go to her, and I went to her and said, hey, Karen, I have some good news, and I have some bad news. Now, we did negotiate a pretty fair deal for Karen, and we do still pay her. But I will tell you this, that if that check didn't come in this month, she'd still show up. And that's what you want to motivate in your faculty, and you have to be creative to get there. Now, it's not just about creating spaces. Just real quickly, I'll tell you another story where our CFO at the time when I came in, as I began to get to know her and talk about what her real passions were, I figured out real quickly that it wasn't really about the budget and the numbers, even though she was very good at that. She was really most interested when I'd go ask advice or get feedback on the things that we were doing with students. And she now is our assistant head of upper school. That's a pretty interesting move from CFO to division head. But if you know your faculty and you're willing to grow them, then you can actually find those places where they will live their audacious dream at your school. And so, let me go back. So, real quickly, some of the other things that we've done is we created what's called the PL tree that's here on the left side. That PL tree is for every single faculty member that every year they actually have a growth plan that they have to fill in for themselves that allows them actually to know what they are going to do in that very year to actually be a better educator, to be more passionate, to have deep ponderings and put things into practice. One of the other programs that we started in my second year was the TLC program, the Teacher Leader Cohort. So each year we have 12 teachers that actually go through an application process. And what they get to do is they get to really be a leader on campus. These are for folks that may think they want to go into administration, or maybe they just have a desire to actually do something bigger than their classroom. And so what we do is we give them a full year to actually do action research. They come up with programs. They go and they talk to folks about different initiatives. And then we actually do this. We tell them, put it into practice. And so last year we had 12. And of the 12 action projects last year, we have 7 initiatives that are actually in play right now across our entire campus that teachers are leading. Now, that's important for a few different reasons. One, it's important because these teachers are owning that, and they are living their dream, their audacious dream right now. But also, it's important because I learned in my second year that if things continue the way they were in that first year, that I was going to fall down, that I couldn't keep carrying all the programs and be the point person on everything that was innovative at our school. And so now since that time, I can honestly tell you that I don't even know that people would refer to me as the point leader anymore in innovation in our school. We have dozens of those folks now that are doing things that are notable. And so I encourage you again to think about, after you know your faculty, you have to then grow what you know about them, and you have to then let them go. And it's not always easy when you're in charge of things to be able to say that I'm going to just let you take this program and do it the way you think's best. But you have to trust them. If they go through the process, if you have known them and grown them, then they're going to do very well by it. I'm running low on time, so I'm going to go a little quicker here. But, as we go into the next phase here of talent, one of the most untapped resources, I think, on all of our campuses is our students themselves. We talk all the time about how proud we are of our students, but then I think so often we actually forget that they are actually some of the most talent, and they certainly are the most numerous group on our campuses. You may have heard about our program at All Saints, where we are now doing prosthetics for people all across the world. It all started my very first year. We had 2 students actually that year that had perfect scores in the ACT and the SAT. And as I began to talk to them, I began to ask them questions about, this is incredible. I can't believe that you have that much knowledge. What do you do with that? And they were like, take tests? Did you hear? I made a perfect score on the ACT, SAT. And I really respectfully said, that's really cool, but who does that impact but you? And I really remember these 2 students were a little bit, put off by this. But I encouraged them that you know so much right now. You know more than many people that I know in my life that are adults that are really trying to do big things in this world. So why aren't you doing something with that today? So I challenged them actually to think about how they could apply their knowledge of math and science in the world and have impact all around them. So we first started with this project where they built a prosthetic device for a young man in Honduras named Osman. He was 22 at the time and had never had the opportunity to have a prosthetic fitted for him. And after 5 iterations, Osman today still has a device that he uses that was built by our students. It has merged since that time into a lot of different programs. We have the Copper Roof Media. I encourage you, they would be so happy if you actually went and followed them on Twitter or on Instagram or hit their website. They'd be very happy if I encourage you to do that. But they are actually a fully functioning media company that was started by a group of 7 students 2 years ago. And they actually have grown into a company that has billable hours of over $500,000 a year now. Now, I do want to make sure when I say that, I know there's lots of thoughts on this, but we don't actually bill our clients, but we bill them, but we don't accept the payment for that. We want them to know how much that service is worth. But our students actually do a lot of work. They work with now 24 companies and nonprofits all over East Texas, the region, but also the world. We have clients that are actually all over the United States. But these students actually, again, have the agency to have impact, to apply what they know, and to have meaning, a lot of talent there. One of the other really cool challenges that I started my first year was this, what we call the design challenge. And again, being a middle school head, I decided I would employ 6th graders to jump out there and design changes across our campus. And so I found a teacher who was passionate, one of those front runners. And I just want to show you a quick video here in a second. But since that time, we have built several spaces with our students designing and implementing all those changes, all the way from our first tiny town, the early learning playground, to now this incredible new All Saints green space. And this year, our collaboration, inquiry, and action room, the CIA room, right? They're 6th graders. They had to have a funny acronym. They wanted to make it cool. But all these spaces were designed as part of, again, allowing 6th graders to actually have a deep purpose in what they were doing and going through design thinking. I'll show you just a real quick video. We're on time, so I won't show you all of it.
I am Cindy Pointer, and I'm the 6th grade math teacher, math enrichment, and STEM coordinator. The green space is an area outside, kind of in the middle of the campus, between the cafeteria student center and the upper school and middle school buildings. And for the 6th grade design challenge, they had to find a space that they felt we could make better than it is today, or what it was then. And so they decided that was their space that they were in the most, and that's the space they wanted to redesign.
Well, it's an area where everybody used to, when you have a break or recess, you want to go out there and you want to have fun. So we decided, our idea and our challenge was to come up with ways to improve it and make it better for everybody.
And then also we have...
I'll talk a lot more about this tomorrow in my workshop session and really deep dive into what that process is like. Lastly, I just want to mention our VR room. It's notable some of the things that we're doing at All Saints with virtual reality and augmented reality. We have really found ways to tap into really having the opportunity for our students to have these incredible learning simulations, but also to delve into how they can apply technology to their learning. But one of the coolest things about this is that everything we've done with VR, if you've seen some of the things that we're doing, they're all driven by students 100%. Our entire VR room was built and constructed by students, and also all the implementation, the working with teachers, is done co-teaching with students and teachers together. The story is that when I was thinking about the Center for Innovation, we were designing it, I actually looked out and reached out to several experts in the field of VR and how they were using education. I was a little frustrated, and I really was not going to go anywhere. I ended up having 4 experts that used to lay on their backpacks outside my office each day that happened to be freshman boys. And I gave them a challenge to go out and find out how they would actually, first of all, build this, how they would then implement it with teachers, and then how we would sustain it over time. And they have done just that. It's pretty incredible. So you can employ your students to do some really big things. Lastly, I mentioned already the Garden of Eden, but I do want to say that one of the innovative things that we did was when I came to All Saints, we had a very traditional cafeteria system. We had a food service provider, and they did a very fine job for us. But one of the things that we learned as we were going into building the farm is that was going to be difficult for them. And so I moved into hiring a chef in the area that was pretty renowned, and I knew he had a real passion for farm-to-table food. And Chef Brady, this is the funniest picture of him, but I love messing with him. But he works with our students now every day from the farm to have these students actually understand how to go from farm to table, how fresh food tastes, and how to think about sustainability. It has actually grown into now upper school classes where this education-trained person is one of the deepest pedagogical thinkers you'll ever imagine. And he actually leads now, we have classes called Cookmunity, where they actually serve 8 dinners to our different community partners all around the city of Tyler. So lastly, I'm going to go through this quickly, but we've also engaged our community. What I've learned is that the talent that happens on campus is so important, but also how you actually then partner with those that are outside of your campus can be more meaningful. We've gained a lot of notoriety for how we have actually gotten our students out into the community, how we've actually had them now working with Christian Women's Job Corps. We actually have 3 students now that actually serve on the board of trustees of this very important East Texas Foundation. And long story, I won't go into it because of time, but they actually had to get a unanimous vote by the trustees to actually have the students under the age of 18 on their board. But they actually were the ones who created their ad campaign, went to the United Way and actually got $17,000 to put those ads on billboards. And the organization said, we have to put these girls on our board after that. We actually have several other students who have gone in and done things like For the Silent. We had a young man who actually built boxes for students who had been in the sex trafficking industry. After he built these boxes, he was so passionate about this that he went to our students in our e-cafe who give 20% of their proceeds to a nonprofit, and he became the advocate for that group. And it was so powerful for me to watch him now move into being an activist for a cause. We have students, again, working with prosthetics and now partner with UT Tyler's School of Occupational Therapy, where we have students that are actually using therapists as their partners to go out and actually serve all around the community. So when you think about the talent, there's an awful lot of it around your campus, and I encourage you to think about how you use your teachers, your students, but also your community partners. Lastly, I'll just talk in closing about time. Because what happens so often in our schools is we spend a lot of time, as I've done today, talking about the spaces and the talent. But when we put all this energy into those things, what we end up finding is that our schools actually then cram all that within a traditional bell schedule or traditional day that then doesn't allow for any of those things to actually have this renewal or this change ability in our campuses and for our students. And so you have to think deeply about how time impacts everything that we do at school. It's something that we know for sure. But one of the books that was really influential as we began to really research how we could think about time in our school was Daniel Pink's book, When. I encourage you to read it as just a way to think about how you can think about time and innovation. But again, quickly, he says in the book that there are definite times in the day that actually things are better, and there are times in the day that it's worse. And this is really interesting. I challenge you to go look at the research in this book and then put your schedule with it. And I can guarantee you that some of your schools actually have really bad intersections there, because that's what we found. We found actually that there were some times where we had some really important things that were happening during times that were really, really bad for students. And so we began to really look at how we could rethink about this. He actually talks about different types of kids too, and people, and so we looked at that research. So we began to do things like we have a late start for our students in the upper school. We looked at how we could change time in the middle school and intermediate school. So we created core times and flex times so that we could actually allow for some of these cool things that were happening in classes with teachers to happen. But we also allowed for flexibility within our schedule in our early learning lower school, meaning that every day doesn't have to look like the next day. And I know that challenges our thoughts as teachers, right? That we could actually have Monday not look like Wednesday. Oh my gosh, but we can do that. But we have to get permission for that in our schools, and the research will lead you to that. So when we began to have these conversations, again, allowing teachers to ask good questions, but also to make comments on our schedule, that was really freeing. I mean, there were a few teachers actually saying, like, I never thought I could say anything about the schedule. And they were right. In the past, they probably would not have been greeted very warmly with those critiques. But in our new life, we're like, that's great. What do we need to do? But when we think about, again, this time, it is so important. And I put it over money and energy here because I will say that what I've watched happen in our school is the more that we've invested the time into the things that are important, the more that people have really realized how we believe and how important it is to our North Star. Lastly, one of the last things that I'll say is that we did a Last Friday program to show how important professional growth is for our faculty. And I encourage you in whatever way you show that to your school community, you need to do so. So what we do is every last Friday of the month, we actually send students home at noon, and we have from noon to 4, we have professional growth for our faculty and staff. Now, when that first happened, it was a little controversial. I mean, you're sending the kids home. I mean, wow, why would you do that? We're losing all this instructional time. And what we said is that we can't imagine having instructional time if we don't do this, that how can we have valuable time for your students if we don't have valuable time for our staff? And so this has been so cool. Our students said things like, I can't believe our teachers have to go to class too. They loved it. They loved knowing that teachers had class every last Friday. But you have to look at how you're using your time across campus. The Power of Moments is another read I'll suggest for you if you're thinking deeply on how you create these moments within your campus. This book talks about how there are actually moments within your life, within your year, within your month, within your day that actually have more powerful impact and how you can help create those. I'm going to skip across that a little bit. And the way that we really use this when we talk about time was we created what I think of as the yes and culture, that we really stay away from saying no unless we just have to, but also not saying yeah but, which is just a really polite no for our faculty. So when they ask questions about time, we actually always want to go to this yes and philosophy that then results in these wow moments, as we call them, across campus. These moments that really are transformational for our kids, and that we've learned that wow moments rarely happen in a 45-minute block, and so we have to be flexible to that. And the last thing I wanted to mention is this idea of Scrum. We have really been so deeply ingrained in this thought about how we think about problem solving in our school. And we used agile thinking through the book Scrum by Jeff Sutherland. And I won't go into a lot of detail on this. I hope to do that tomorrow in my workshop session. But this has probably been one of the most significant things for us. Across all of our departments and all of our divisions, we now use this process to actually help us understand workflow, but actually how to generate ideas and how to go into the implementation. This is actually our board for our leadership team, where we have all of our different strategic areas, and then we have our sprints, we have our backlog, and then we move into our OODA loop. One of the cool things about it is that we actually have this entire thing now where every project that we do across campus, we go into this process called OODA looping, where we create an artifact where we have to talk about what we did, what we liked about it, and what we didn't do. It seems like it's not very novel, but think about it, we don't do that very often. And so what we've found is that through this process, we've actually refined the things that we do. We've actually decided not to do some other things. And we've gained, again, some recognition for going from what they say from concept to class very rapidly. We can find out what we really want to do and what we want to do fast, and we go and we do it. And so when we think about, again, this idea of intentional innovation, I hope that today maybe I've sparked your thoughts on a few things about how you might use your time, your talent, or your space more effectively. And I hope that each one of you will go back to your campus and thinking about how you might truly bring about this renewal or change and how, again, it's accessible for every campus. Thank you very much.